Would you please stand with me for the reading of the word? Today we will be reading from Psalm 118, verses 1 through 4, and 28 and 29. In Portuguese. Louvai ao Senhor, porque Ele é bom, porque a sua benignidade dura para sempre. Diga agora a Israel que a sua benignidade dura para sempre. Diga agora à casa de Arão que a sua benignidade dura para sempre. Digam agora os que temam ao Senhor, que a sua benignidade dura para sempre. Verse 28. Tu és o meu Deus, e eu te louvarei. Tu és o meu Deus, e eu te exaltarei. Louvai ao Senhor, porque Ele é bom, porque a sua benignidade dura para sempre.
In Hawaiian, verse 1. E mililani aku ia I Jehovah, no ka mea he maikai ia. A ua mauloa hoi kono loko maikai, e olelo mai oka Israela. Ua mauloa kona loko maikai, e olelo mai ka ohana a Arona. Ua mauloa kona loko maikai, e olelo mai no ka poe e makau aku ia I Jehovah. Ua mauloa kona loko maikai. Verse 28. O oe no ko'u akua, e mililani aku au ia oe. O ko'u akua no, e hapai aku au ia oe. E mililani aku ia I Jehovah, no ka mea ua maikai I o ia. Ua mauloa ho'i kono loko maikai.
Verse 1. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let Israel say, his love endures forever. Let the house of Aaron say, his love endures forever. Let those who fear the Lord say, his love endures forever. Verse 28. You are my God, and I will give you thanks. You are my God, and I will exalt you. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. You may be seated.
I don't know about you, but when I hear these texts spoken and read in languages that are not our first languages, I am overwhelmed by that, because it is a picture of what one day multiple language will be spoken simultaneously and will understand everything. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. This is one of those events every year, including graduation, where we dress up for the occasion in outlandish outfits. What's interesting is that this is really a testimony to the fact that we're part of a certain organizational stream. We're part of academic history. In the 12th century, actually, these uniforms were actually really not about fashion, but about utility. They were big sleeves. You could put your lunch. They were heavy because you sat in lecture halls without heat in the middle of winter in Europe. They are actually quite practical. I was just at Oxford in February, and you'll still see students in certain colleges at Oxford going down the street on their bikes with their robes flowing as they go from class to class. You'll see professors walking in the various courtyards of the colleges, as they've done for hundreds of years in these uniforms. Really, in the United States, they were worn until the Civil War, and if you would go to the University of South in Sewanee, Tennessee, students still wear these to class. Now, if you were in Finland, we wouldn't worry so much about these outfits. We would be designated by the hats we wear. And in fact, most of our all of our faculty would wear top hats. It would be somewhere between Fred Astaire and Abraham Lincoln, is what they would all look like. Because my family doesn't live here, I want to introduce you to my family. There'll be a photo up there. This was taken last August at the wedding of our youngest daughter. And the lovely lady, I was going to say the most lovely lady, but I have 4 lovely women in my life. But the one that I've been around longest is my wife, Lois. Lois, won't you stand? For 40 years, she's tolerated me. I cannot say enough about the strength of a partner in life who cares deeply about our family and has stood beside me in a variety of situations. And I am deeply, deeply grateful. The occasion of this picture was the marriage of our youngest daughter, Olivia, who at 33 years old finally got married and married Adam, our son-in-law. As you know, our daughter is the artsy one in the family, and she's a film director. Her documentary, Sin by Silence, has won a number of international awards. And just last week, bills in the California State Assembly, which are named after her documentary, Sin by Silence, were passed by the California State Assembly so that victims of domestic violence will have new rights. And those who have been put in prison without proper judicial process will now have access to appeals. I am deeply grateful for my daughter's work. She actually listened to something I said when she was younger, and that is that she has chosen to give voice to the voiceless, and I am deeply grateful for that. Olivia got married at 33. Our other daughter, which you'll see to the left there, Victoria, got married when she was 19. So we're glad that there was like 17 or 18 years interval. If you're a father giving away daughters, you only have 2 daughters, it takes you that long to recover. You will see her husband by her Clint, and as you know, a year ago he was in a terrible motorcycle accident. We're just happy that he's alive. And they live in Central California and farther out in the country than we do, and you'll see there my 2 grandchildren, Dara, who is now a teenager, and my grandson Nolan, who is 11 tomorrow. They are spread all over California. We are the ones that moved here to Missouri, and they remind us that on a regular basis. The text that you heard read this morning was actually something that is one of those texts that's familiar. It has a phrase that is very familiar. And at a meeting of Assemblies of God College presidents this summer, Dr. Carol Taylor, who's president at Vanguard University, read this text. We read, in fact, this entire chapter together, and she then went on to talk about how this particular text had been of such strength to her during a time in the history of Vanguard University in which there were tremendous challenges that were difficult, moments in which they did not know whether or not their existence would move beyond the next day. And because of that, this text, which sometimes is overly familiar, sometimes we view it simply as a promise, as if the Bible is merely a book of promises. I remember that when I was a child, I'd visit my grandfather's farm in the summer, and early in the morning we would have breakfast together. And before we left the table to go to do the work of the day, there was a little box. In that box there were scripture verses, and you pulled one out, and it was your promise for the day. And some days it connected, and other days it was like out of the blue. And those were wonderful times. I don't want to disparage that at all. But texts that we become overly familiar with and view simply as a nice promise to begin the day really have much more substance. They are not just strength for the day. They are foundation for the years. And because Carol, told her story as we read this text together, I have decided to look at this text in a greater way than I've ever viewed before. And I just want to give you a few thoughts this morning because I think it's particularly apropos to the place that we are at here at AGTS. In the first verse, you clearly see we're given direction, a starting point in life, a starting point for our day, a starting point for the way we see the world. Oh, give thanks to the Lord. Why should we do that? Well, because he's good. And his goodness is not just abstraction. His goodness, in fact, can be demonstrated through testimony that his love, his mercy endures forever. So here's a perspective of life, a perspective on God, that he is our starting point. His action flows from his character, and our response as the creation is to give thanks for his mercy that demonstrates itself day after day after day after day. In verses 2 to 4, you see that this testimony, this acknowledgement is given in the context of public worship. You can see here, let Israel say, his love endures forever. Let the house of Aaron say, his love endures forever. Let those who fear the Lord say, his love endures forever. This is done in public with different groups, those who would come to public worship. And while they were one unit, they were designated to sit in certain areas, to be in certain areas, and they came to this experience and heard what was going to be testified to them in different ways. So the public has come to worship. They hear this phrase, oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, his love endures forever, in different ways. So here we are this morning. We hear this text just as these who first heard it. We hear it in different ways. We come from different backgrounds. But the testimony of the leader of this particular experience in this public setting begins to tell his story. It is what, in another century, in another time, some of us with gray hair called a testimony service. In this public setting, some would argue that what we have here is liturgy, which the psalmist just follows. Others would say, no, this was, in a sense, the pattern of leaders like this who would come into the public assembly and give testimony to the goodness of God, and it became liturgy. However you look at this particular text, the truth that is being disseminated, that is being shouted to all who would hear, is his love endures forever. And it is heard through different ears. But the story is understandable. We hear the psalmist here. The psalmist says in verse 5, in my anguish, he answered me. He set me free. He set me in a place. He didn't just rescue me and set me on a cliff where I had no room to move. No, he set me free. He put me in a broad place. He put me in a place where I had new perspective on life. And you can see this anguish of the one who is given testimony in public worship is not just merely, I was just having a rough day and I just really felt bad. No, he gives testimony here, and he says in verse 8, it's better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than trust in princes. Obviously, this guy had been let down by people he knew. Obviously, in the relationships of his life, he had known what it was to somehow be disappointed by people who were in his life. So this testimony that he gives is, his word of public acknowledgement is, you know what, I've come to know that while I have friends and while I have business associates, it's better to take refuge in my anguish of the Lord, as opposed to over-relying on folks who will inevitably let me down. So he's in anguish. Who can't identify with that? Who can't identify with the kinds of experiences that all of us have, where we get the raw end of the deal. We get sort of shunned aside by those we have placed our trust in. And here is the one who testifies in public places that there will be times in which you will be let down. His testimony is, it will occur. I have learned, he says, to place my trust in something much more substantial than those friends by any definition. And then he says, look what he says in verse 10. I mean, he continues his discussion of difficulty in his life and who, listening in that worship service that day, regardless of what their experience had been, wouldn't understand this. He said, all nations surrounded me. They surrounded me on every side. Who hasn't felt that? I mean, nationally, these folks here would understand this. They're in Israel. There's all kinds of people trying to get at them, all kinds of ites who are trying to get at them. I mean, that is the experience for thousands of years to this very day. All of us understand what it is to be surrounded by those who don't seem to be on our side. It is described here in verse 12 as they are swarming around me like bees. Verse 13, I was pushed back and about to fall. So here's this picture, this testimony that's being given in public place. And people who are hearing it are saying, I can identify with that. I remember the day and the great strength of this thing we called testimony service was that it was largely unrehearsed. And because it was unrehearsed, it was pretty raw. It was not sophisticated. But the thing that always happened to me when I heard these testimonies, which sometimes were repeated time and time and time again, was this. If God can help them, maybe he can help me. If God is on their side, maybe he's on my side too. And as you listen to the texture and you listen to the reality and the concreteness of anguish, of nations being against you, of bees swarming around you, of being pushed back into a corner and not being able to know what your next breath may be like, to hear the story that somebody lived through that is great news. Wasn't sophisticated, didn't have any video to go with it. It was just a voice painting a picture of this God whose love endures forever had intersected my life. He says in verse 14, look at this. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. Now, all of those are good things, but there's clear differentiation. What you see here is a person who has had sustenance in the moment. He has become my strength and my song. In this moment, I've been able to get through that moment. It's like you have your iPod and you put your earbuds in your ears and you say, oh man, I need that song. And you play that song and for the moment, God gives you strength. But he says, not only is the God I serve the one who gives me strength for that moment, that music, that song, that gets me through that moment, but he has become my salvation. There is not only a God who comes to us for the moment and gives us strength for that moment, but his love is enduring. It is long term. It has implications not just for that moment, but implications for every dimension of our lives. In 14 and 15 here we see, the Lord is my strength and my song. He's become my salvation. Shouts of joy and victory resound in the tents of the righteous. To this testimony by this king who testifies to the goodness of God, folks who are there are so filled in their hearts with, if God is for him, he can be for me. Oh, hallelujah. There is shouts of joy. There is inspiration. There is exuberation as we hear declare the goodness of God in our ears. We hear the story of divine rescue. We hear that story public acknowledged. This is what God did for me. Rejoice with me at the enduring love of God. There isn't anyone here who doesn't feel like this psalmist, who at times has been assailed from every side, who's had the bees around your head, who has felt as if you were pushed into a corner and did not know which way you would go. The good news is, from this testimony, that his love endures forever. But it's not just for us. It's not just for our personal journey. It is for the fact that as with these worshipers who came to the temple, we come to this place living in a day and an age that is extraordinary. It is, in a sense, we've never passed this way before. I just want to refer to several books that I've perused over the years. One is a book written by Alvin Toffler. It was written about 30 years ago. It was called Future Shock. And I remember reading that book, and that particular book was pretty overwhelming. It essentially said that change will occur so fast, all of the world will simply be overwhelmed. And Toffler at that point was called a futurist. He was looking into the future and he said, boy, isn't that? I mean, it was sort of science fiction to us. You read Toffler 30 years later, and it's like the headlines of newspaper. Another book I recently took some time to do on my Kindle. It was one of these e-books that you can read in a short period of time, produced by the TED Group. It was called Hybrid Reality: Thriving in an Emerging Human Technology Civilization. And it was, in a sense, this larger world that all of us live in. This world that has changed the rules, feeling about being pushed back. There seems as if Toffler says change is coming so fast at us that we don't know how to respond. We're almost overwhelmed on a regular basis. And what the authors, the Khannas, do in this particular book on hybrid reality is they begin to describe what they call disruptive eras. For instance, the disruptive era that moves from the Stone Age to the Neolithic Age, which is more agrarian, and the movement from agrarian society to industrial society, where you have steam power, and the move from industrial society in the manufacturing world to an information society with the internet. In all cases, these people say that technology, not just technology a la internet, but technology of tools and greater agricultural capabilities, and then steam power, all of technology has driven history. Here's a definition of a disruptive era. An era in which we find that the rules of the past no longer work, where all of the equations we have used to navigate the world seem to have been thrown to the wind. Listen to this, and you'll see it on the screen. Disruptive eras are times of uninterrupted disturbance for all social conditions, everlasting uncertainty and agitation. All fixed, fast, frozen relations with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices are swept away. All new formed ones become antiquated before they can ossify. All that is solid melts into the air. And I'll bet that you've even had trouble reading that. That was really intentional. The point is that stuff is sort of cockeyed. What we've been used to doesn't work anymore. What is also interesting is this particular phrase was written in the mid-19th century by Karl Marx in his Communist Manifesto. Now you say, what in the world does the Communist Manifesto have to do with Psalm 118? Well, I have learned that there are some folks who don't acknowledge God who have some insight into the world we live in. It is truth, small t, that necessitates smooth truth, uppercase T. And in this particular case, Marx describes for us the world that we live in. The world that we live in which our equations have gone by the wayside, where technology has become so pervasive. It's like the air we breathe, and it is moved not only into information, but complex entanglements of humans and nature. Human technology that used to coexist with humans now becomes co-evolving with humans. We live in a world of artificial intelligence, of avatars, of bionics. And the perception that biological and technological complexity are uniform, The suggestion that there is no difference between creation described as good and creation as described as made in the image of God. That is a scary point to be in. That is a moment in which you and I live. Now, I don't know how we may move through this time, but a world which says the present is ever morphing, and we value the new because the new has autonomy with no reference to the past, is countered by what the Bible says. The Bible says God is good. His love endures forever. That is, the foundational that is enduring is new every morning. But it's not autonomous in and of itself. It finds its root in the character of who God is. God is good. So you and I look at this text and we say, isn't it wonderful? God is good. His love endures forever, and he helped me through the day. That is a wonderful thing to realize. But the fact is that we live in a day and an age where this is not just a promise. It is absolutely, categorically, the foundation on which we would live. This is not about the present ever morphing. This is about the future that comes from the past and is enduring. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The simple fact is that we do face a transitional year. The kind of consolidation that we're facing, we face unknowns. There is little precedent for the journey that has significant potential. I'm here to tell you this morning that I believe this particular text, give thanks to God, for he is good. His love endures forever, can stand the test of all challenges. That you and I do not just take this text and say, oh, that's a wonderful promise, and somehow in a almost Pollyanna way, trip through life as if we are living in the midst of nothing but a beautiful green valley with water. No, we're living in rockiness. And even in those settings, with huge challenges, a drought all around us, we need to understand that the God who's in charge of this universe is in charge of the details that we now face. We can respond to these challenges with reliance on case studies, best practices, strategic planning, and those are all legitimate building stones. But what we've got to do is remind ourselves of who we are, what God has called us to, recalling the goodness of God, telling the stories of what God has done in our life. For instance, next Wednesday in chapel here, an AGTS grad who left Springfield in the 90s, went out to the Pacific Northwest, thought he had landed in paradise, coffee on every corner. I mean, he thought he was in paradise. God has brought him back to downtown Springfield. A country boy from Arkansas who thought he'd been delivered. And God brought a passion in his heart to come back to Springfield to serve a crowd of people who have been bypassed by our religiosity. The love of God is extraordinary. We need to remind ourselves of those kinds of stories. Where we've come from for the last 40 years. Our story to this day, thousands of alumni who've encountered this God who is good, whose mercy endures forever. Several weeks ago here, one of our alums, 1986 alum, Egyptian, now the superintendent of the Assemblies of God in Egypt, tells us the story of what it means to follow Jesus in that society. Don't you think that when he hears this text, he hears it in vastly different ways that you and I might hear it? He needs it in ways and dimensions in his life that are extraordinary. That's what we need to do. We need to remember that in the midst of the challenges that we can't even define, that we can only understand in a small way, here is the God who's initiated his love towards us while we were yet sinners. The text finishes up this wonderful imagery of stones. Well, if you're in a temple, stones are all around you. So you can figure out, the imagery here is understandable. And he uses this by saying the stones that the builders rejected, those things we build our lives on. The question really to us is, what stone, what framework will you build your life on? In fact, the stones that the builders rejected, he says, have become the capstone. Peter, hundreds of years later, loves this particular text. He uses it regularly. And in his epistle, gives us this picture in 1 Peter 2 of this temple being built of living stones with a capstone. That stone, that framework, that understanding, that linchpin that everyone has rejected has become our cornerstone. The one who endures, the God who is good, who sent his Son to redeem us from sin. His love endures forever. You may be starting out here at AGTS. You may have been here for a long time. You may be a student, you may be an employee. But this psalm is for us today. It just doesn't begin with, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever." It finishes that way. "You are my God, and I will give you thanks. You are my God, and I will exalt you. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever." That word endure is real interesting. Languages being when you translate biblical languages into whatever is your first language, sometimes there aren't words in your language to capture the texture of the biblical understanding. Endure is one of those words in English. Endure is you sort of endure pain in a marathon, okay? You endure. What does that mean? I survived. I got through it. But the reason that we sometimes frame the word endurance with that image in our mind is because we focus on us do the enduring. This is a human perspective. We endured. We've survived. But this text tells us that the endurance we're looking at is not ours, but God's. That it is his initiative that comes at us. It is enduring. It is never failing. It doesn't run out of gas. It comes from a transcendent source. The older I get, the more I remember old songs. I don't know what it is in the brain, but sometimes in the midst of difficult times, I remember songs not that I heard last week, but songs I heard when I was a child. It'll happen to you. Regardless of how young you are, it'll happen to you. Okay? Just wait. Okay? And one of those that I remember has to do with endurance. When we've reached the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving is only begun. Because his love has no limits, his grace has no measure, his power has no boundary known unto men. For out of his infinite riches in Jesus, he giveth and giveth and giveth again. Oh, give thanks to the Lord wherever you are. Whatever your story is, and wherever you are on that journey, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. And if we had another 2 hours, I'd tell you stories about the fact of how his enduring love has changed my life. Jesus, we're grateful today for this moment in which we are reminded that our journey has brought us to this place. That here at AGTS we are making significant transitions organizationally. I pray, oh God, that you would give us grace, that you would give us your endurance. We're counting on that, oh God, because you're good, and we have no reason to believe that you are otherwise. We give thanks to you today. In the midst of this transition year, in the midst of a journey that we don't quite have pegged yet, we give thanks to you for your love. Your love endures forever. We're going to close a little bit differently this morning. I want you to stand with me this morning. And we're going to begin singing a song together that Randy and Dwayne will lead. A song that's very familiar, Christ Alone. And as we sing this first verse, I'm going to ask the faculty to come and kneel around these altars. The reason for that is that I just believe that this teaching learning experience that has been going on here for 40 years is in an extraordinary year. And we need in our lives to understand what's at stake. None of us are here in this room by accident. I'm not just talking mantras here. The truth is that we live in a time that is described by Marx as a time in which the future seems to slip away before it comes. A time in which humans and human technology are meshing together in ways we've never known before. How do we navigate that? Some of you come today with incredible stories. You come with destiny on your heart. And these learning experiences that you have here are a part of that. We want them to be extraordinarily pushed by the Spirit of God. So as we sing, I'm going to ask the faculty to come and kneel around these altars as people who are central to this task. Dr. Ben Aker, one of our wonderful professors, emeritus, will come and pray over this faculty. Let's sing together. And as Ben prays, I want you to extend your hands to these faculty members as we pray over them.